This is Raven Cade, and this is a special edition of the Wrap-Up Show brought to you by CSMlocal. Log on today if you are a service provider, and you can register free right now for a limited time to be a part of the Corporate Partnership Program. CSMlocal.com is the destination that you need to know to get back to business. They are experts in this area. Get back to business, and their motto is this: making your life hassle-free and treating you and your business like VIP. In Washington today, the bipartisan COVID-19 emergency relief bill of 2020 has been released. As of today, the emergency assistance for American families, workers, and small businesses in the tune of $748 billion. Here are the details in order of this bill. You can find this information online. It's very public knowledge. I will place the link in the show so you can read it and digest it for yourselves. This is what has happened today in Congress. It is a bill that is introduced. It has not been voted on as of yet, but I would anticipate within the next 48 hours there will be a vote to get this bill enacted. Extension of all unemployment assistance for 16 weeks with supplemental $300 per week stipend supplement. $300 billion for Small Business Administration, second round of PPP for small businesses, including 501c6 restaurants, live venues, and EIDL grants. The EIDL grants are now back into the equation. Loan forgiveness process is simplified for borrowers with PPP loans of $150,000 or less. There is $13 billion of the $748 for emergency food assistance, increased SNAP assistance, that is formerly food stamp program, and funding for food banks and food pantries. $13 billion will be dedicated to providing funding to address COVID-related impacts on farmers, ranchers, growers, and fisheries. $25 billion for the emergency rental assistance and extension of eviction moratorium through January the 31st. That means you have an additional 30 days of that eviction moratorium protection from the government. Extension of student loan forbearance through April 1st of 2021. Now, this is good news for anybody that has a student loan, with the propensity of your taxes, forthcoming taxes, being used to pay your student loans. So that means that will get you at least until April 1st of next year. Now, taxes are due on April 15th each year, so you got a little bit of time to save some more money. So as soon as that forbearance grace period is over on the 1st of April, then I will imagine that by the time President-elect Joe Biden gets into office, that has been said that he's going to work on student loan forgiveness. Not sure how that will be accomplished as of yet. And as that information comes down the pike, I will definitely get you in the know of everything that's going on as far as that's concerned. But as far as we know, as of right now in this bill, if it passes, which I do anticipate that happening within a vote within the next 48 hours, at least you have until April 1st to not have to be concerned about student loans. When we come back, we'll take a look at some healthcare benefits, testing and tracing for vaccination, development and distribution, and more items in this brand new bill, the Bipartisan Emergency COVID Relief Act of 2020, entitled Emergency Assistance for American Families, Workers, and Small Businesses, in the tune of $748 billion. We'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to The Wrap-Up Show with Raven Cade. Hello, this is Raven Cade, and I work with Legend Driven Auto Group in Lawton, Oklahoma, and we're powered by Rocky Mountain Yeti. And as your quick path guide, it's my job and mission to make sure that I help you discover the perfect vehicle, help you find the right financial decisions that's right for you and your family, and give you the keys so you can drive off to your next adventure. I want the opportunity to earn your business. So let's have a conversation. Give me a call today at 580-284-4256. That number again, 580-284-4256. You'll be glad you did. And we're back to the wrap-up show, and I'm Raven Cade, and it's all brought to you weekly by CSMlocal. For more information on what CSMlocal can do for your business or connect you to service providers, log on to www.csmlocal.com. In the last segment, we left off talking about COVID Relief Act of 2020, the bipartisan deal that has been drafted into a final bill that I would imagine within the next 48 hours will be voted upon and hopefully unanimously approved. The people of this country need some help at this juncture. $35 billion for Healthcare Provider Relief Fund, which includes $7 billion for rural providers. So that means any doctors or health organizations in rural America will get a part of that $35 billion that is going to be offered in this bill. $16 billion will be used for testing, tracing, and vaccine development and distribution. $12 billion in CDFI/MDI targeted emergency investments to help low-income and minority communities withstand the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and respond to the unprecedented economic downturn. So, in other words, health care will be put in place with these entities so these health providers that are providing these health services can maintain pretty much overhead and paying, the providers to give said treatment, because without some backing from the government, it would be infinitely harder to treat people without some type of money being put back into their establishments so they can continue to treat people that have low income. $5 billion will be in emergency funding for substance abuse prevention and treatment and mental health. $82 billion will be used for educational funding, including $54 billion dedicated to K through 12 schooling, $20 billion dedicated to higher education like junior colleges and things of that nature, even some state-level four-year universities, and $7.5 billion for the governor's fund. This includes targeted aid for private and parochial schools, minority-serving institutions, territories, and the Bureau of Indian Education. $10 billion to child support care providers struggling due to the COVID-19 pandemic. $10 billion for broadband services. $6 for state broadband connectivity and development. $3 billion for educational connectivity and distance learning. So what has happened, and it's no secret, the era of live streaming has been catapulted to the forefront due to the social distancing mandates throughout the states. So you got to be able to keep that broadband and internet connections piping out for the Zoom meetings and the distant learning, and money that is allocated in that $10 billion is to help facilitate the technology used to maintain the functionality and stability of broadband services. $45 billion will be allocated in emergency funding for the transportation sector, assistance for airlines, airports, buses, Amtrak, and public transit. Eliminates repayment requirement for $10 billion of the United States Postal Service loan included in CARES Act 1. And out of that $45 billion for the emergency funding for the transportation sector, it is supposed to eliminate repayment for the $10 billion of the United States Postal Service loan, which was included in CARES Act 1, and also repurpose unused Treasury CARES Act funding and PPP, and allow the intelligence and defense contractors to have flexible contracts as long as this pandemic continues to drive forward. So when we come back, there's one more piece of legislation that needs to be addressed, and this is for the state and local services and entities to get us by until more help tentatively is on the way. You're listening to the Wrap-Up Show with Raven Cade. We'll be right back. S&W Beauty Supply is connecting with you in a big way. Simply text SWBS to 77948 for special VIP discount codes. We have wigs for all, hair extensions, girl hair bows, special order colognes, and perfumes. Great customer services abound at S&W Beauty Supply, 205 West Broadway in Altus, where you can now text SWBS to 77948 for your special discount code. That's S&W Beauty Supply. You'll be glad you did. And we're back with the wrap-up show, special edition. I'm Raven Cade, and now we're moving on to the Bipartisan State and Local Support and Small Business Protection Act of 2020. This is section by section, and the state and local and tribal assistance will receive $160 billion, and $152 billion will address aid to states and local governments through the Coronavirus Relief Fund. A third of the $152 billion will be distributed based on each state's appropriation to the U.S. population. So that is where your stimulus and census information comes into play. 2/3 of the $152 billion will be distributed based on the appropriation of each state's revenue losses relative to the total revenue losses of all states nationwide. And each state is entitled to a minimum of $500 million per state. The distribution of said funds will be released in 3 phases. The first phase will be $50.66 billion from the population-based funding will be dispersed to states within 30 days of enactment. So in addition, needs-based funding that tracks actual revenue losses incurred by the state and local governments from April 1st of this year to September 30th. Relative to the same period in 2019 will be dispersed within 30 days of the enactment. So in other words, actually they're going to look at the time frame from April 1st to September 30th of 19 and compare how much of the losses that the states have sustained to get a piece of that $50.66 billion. The second phase is a needs-based funding. That means if it's still needed, that tracks revenue losses incurred by the state and local governments from October 1st of 2020 to March 31st of 2021 relative to the same period in 2019 will be dispersed no later than June the 1st. It is expected that an additional $52 billion will be dispersed in this phase, totaling to $142 billion with the inclusion of phase 1. The third disbursement, at least $10 billion, will be set aside, and it says it must be set aside for this final phase. This is also a needs-based allocation that provides the remaining funding based on the appropriational revenue losses from each state April 1st of 21 to June 30th relative to the same period in 2019. And it is expected that $10 billion of that will be dispersed in that final phase, totaling the $152 billion with an inclusion through phases 1 and 2. $8 billion in funding for the tribes will be allocated by 60% population and 40% on the number of the employees of each tribal entity. Governors must distribute 40% of the state's funding to local government, but they must choose how by proportional population, proportional revenue loss, and or a combination of both. There are no population thresholds, so every county and municipality would be eligible for funding regardless of the size. This also extends the deadline for spending CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund, which was the first installment of the CARES Act, on COVID-related expenses through December 31st of 2021. Guardrails would prohibit the use of these funds to cover enhanced pension obligations. And in addition, states cannot expand public pension benefits while receiving funds. Okay, and the final piece of this legislation is, in my opinion, very important. This is the liability protections that winds all of this piece of legislation together. It establishes a nationwide gross negligence standard for COVID-19 exposure, medical malpractice, and workplace testing claims. It allows plaintiffs to file in state court, but the defendants have the option to remove to federal court if need be. Also, attorney generals have the authority to investigate and bring a civil action addressing pattern or practice of sending meritless demand letters, provides that employers are not subject to liability under federal employment law in COVID-19 exposure cases or change in working conditions related to COVID-19 if the employer was trying to conform to public health standards and guidance, protects public accommodations that makes measures to protect against COVID-19. Also ensures that the employer's decision on PPP, COVID-19 policies, procedures, or training, workplace testing, or financial assistance to an independent contractor does not create evidence of an employer-employee relationship. And also, protections are in play that apply to claims arising from injuries that occurred from December 19 through the latter of 1 year after enactment or at the end of the coronavirus public health emergency. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the bills that are in play to be voted on by our United States Congress and House to get us emergency funds. And thank you for tuning in. I'm Raven K. This has been a special edition of the Wrap Up Show brought to you by CSMlocal. Have a good night.